Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Okay, it's not on yet. There we go. Remembering our future. I found this sentence to be a very unique, to have such a very unique architecture. For remembering is a verb that refers to our past, and in some sense, to remember our future suggests kind of time and the linearity we experience of time, not to be like a straight line, but rather to be circular, you know? In the subtitle, I've written A New Modern Collective Enlightenment. Actually, I think I should change the order of this. Sorry, guys, just hold on a second. Okay, never mind, it's fine. Okay, this is better. Sorry, guys, just hang in there. Uh, or I don't know, maybe I should change it back. Sorry, guys, I'm just working with the title. I'm going to get into the talk. This episode is actually a very important one for me. I mean, all the episodes are important for me because I'm involved. But there's a concept here that must not go acknowledged by our species, and it is the kind of realizing that we can, by being aware and conscious of language and how language storifies the changes of our experiences, which we somehow consider contextually to be the movement of time. To remember our future means to remember what your ancestors' minds were looking at. In the subtitle, I've said I decided to revert the title to its original, A New Modern Collective Enlightenment. So I've been thinking about this a while. I've thought about the liberation of the individual, its liberty, the various writings about the individual's freedom and the importance of the individual in the system, in a collective system. But I have wondered, where is the individual life going? And I noticed that there's a sort of we must acknowledge that we're going into a paradigm of realization. How would I say it? Okay, let me say it like this. Imagine you achieved everything you wanted, everything. You fulfilled, you did everything, you tasted, let's say, every food, you saw everywhere, you satisfied the individual life. Now, what would be the next step? Sometimes I wonder, so many people want to go to heaven and be eternal. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you do when you're eternal? And so of course for Buddhists it gets incredibly intense because the concept of reincarnation, the concept of a transmigrating soul passing and oscillating between what is the reality and the other states of consciousness, and how in Tibetan Buddhism they acknowledge Bardo. In some sense you will kind of walk into the fog of the blurriness of reality, kind of like when you take your glasses off for a moment. It's kind of like this. It's like there's a sort of ever-present intelligence. It puts on its glasses, individual life. It takes off its glasses, collective life. And the bardo is, as it's taking off its glasses, the blurriness of what has been held for so long as real. It's very fascinating. I think that we are not, none of our archetypes, none of the subjective senses of self we entertain, we are actually a potential that has led to a probability behind our eyes. So, how I experience the sense of self is that when the world is bigger than the self, like imagine, like, this is an impossible kind of situation. This is incredibly, like, abstract what I'm saying to you. It has no just I just want the idea to be kind of like, imagine, right? Or Rick and Morty. There we go. Rick and Morty. That TV show captured this idea where they were going towards a planet. And they were trying to find a new planet to live in, and they went to a planet, and they felt the planet was far away, but they went close, and the planet hit the top of the ship, and it was just a small planet. Do you know? So I was kind of thinking that it's because the world is vast that we can entertain various notions of self, various periodical movements of self. It's as if that moment when someone asks you, who are you, the ultimate challenge of life, through all the experiences you have gone through, who are you now? Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like we are moving from the individual. If we say, like, if we idolize right now, let's say everybody loves. There's this show. What is it called? There was this Japanese narrative in some show where there was a lot of people who had decided to just all become heroes. The society was defined by everybody. Every child wanted to be a hero when it growed up, like a hero with a power. And somehow the society had been given, like a vast percentage of the society had been given a sort of power, superpower. And so it was kind of a situation where it's like the idolization of the individual only makes it like the kind of big dogs just in one room. The advancement of civilization cannot come from an individual when it's such a collective system. So ultimately it means that like a percentage of our life is going to the maintenance and attendance of what is occurring behind our eyes, our inner life. And there must be 50% at least go on to the outer life, or at least some sort of contribution be made to the last civilization you will witness before you close your eyes, in some sense. Do you know? So what I mean by that is that you are in this life once. There's an innate value just in being here. Any human being that exists, it's like slow hand clap for your consciousness. You made it to the stage. Now it's time for the performance. So what I mean by that is a new, we can say, and anyone listening, feel free to share your thoughts on the title. It's I find modern civilization has reached this position where we need new colors. That means it's as if there has been certain patterns, programs that our ancestors have been living through endlessly. It's like their ancestors did it before them, and they did it before them, and so a sort of lineage of familiarity as one moves into the unfamiliar. It's kind of like, what do you do when everything's been done? You automatically find yourself in the void. There's many things. You know how much of humanity is based on the behavior of human beings with one another? That many people, they can have the most profoundest philosophies, but they cannot ignore how they are a member of a civilization on a rock in the middle of nowhere. You know, there are certain conclusions that one makes behind their eyes, and there are certain conclusions that become evident in front of their eyes. I find that life has to, in a strange way, to be multidimensional if we are observing a dimension. You know, it's as if like, who do these eyes belong to? I ask that question for myself. I ask myself, who do these eyes belong to? Do they belong to my name? How could they? You know, I think of my name only when I'm called or when my attention it requires to be in it. You know, so I realize, okay, these eyes don't belong to my name, and if they don't belong to my name, they do not belong to the all the everything I have ascribed to this name. You know, my real name is Amin, and Amin, and so it's like when I look at when I have looked at this world, of course, I looked at what the word means and various implications, and eventually I understood I am sculpting meaning. And so when you understand this, this is where I feel it's kind of the first evolution of the scholar's ego. The scholar begins to comprehend that there is the movement of experience. And this is really what distinguishes you as a continental philosopher or an analytical philosopher. An analytical philosopher feels there is, it's like our exploration of the vastness of this phenomenology of that is being the world is limited to language, and it is limited to the biological program. So what that means is sciences and language. So ultimately, it's as if you're an analytical philosopher, you know, where you're kind of aiming towards is to, with what you've got, see what the limits are, you know. But those who are continental philosophers, they feel that before language, you know, there's experience. And so there are those who are wondering on the other side, as if language is a mountain, and there's some people on this side, on a materialistic side, and there's some people on the immaterialistic side. The immaterialistic side points to a dynamic, unknown experiencer. The other side suggests to the object and subjects, to the ways that it has been kept static. It's as if, how can you measure something if that object doesn't stay still? Do you know? So you have to first make it still, then measure it. You know, so that means before even whatever abstract measurement we put, you know, it's as if there's how can I tell you, there is restriction. It's kind of like trying to find a purpose to why energy is instantaneously present. You know, language breaks down at certain realms of experiential self-inquiry. That means you're more an experiencer than a sort of objectified or subjectified self. It's as if the maintenance of the human body, you require to respect and honor certain rules, and ultimately meaning that you have to agree with their source. But there are certain parts of life where The rules are not per se what is being told to you or the voice of the environment. It's how you're taking the voice of the environment in. That means it's kind of realizing that our mind has an ability to be zero, to be nothing. You can literally be present in a moment and be nothing. What I mean is, before you learned language, it's just presence. You can just be a presence, a breathing presence of sight, you know, or a presence of sight purely. And you can live in this world through various ways of the externalization of persona. So, really, what I'm kind of seeing is that the system is too big, too chaotic for an ideological program to govern it. Hence, it means taking the members of the species towards an experiential awareness of life. What does that mean? That means it's very easy to become responsible for a belief. You know, it's like you're a little kid and your parents say, "This is what we believe in," and you're, as a kid, you're like, "What do I know? You're the boss." And the little kid believes. The little kid believes everything that this environment. These children, because in their minds there is more simplicity first before complexity, they simply embrace the complexity. Therefore, the naiveness of childhood. Do you know? But the complexity has a face of its own. And really, what happens, especially in relationships with people, is that the more you are with a person, the more you see how their face looks like in different moments. You know? And so, really, when you look at, I am not against it, of course. I entertain. It's as if who tell freedom what to do. but 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 I have noticed, that means I must stay true to my eyes, and what I see is that it's as if the cultural fabric of modern Western civilization is an idealization of actions done in the collective I, but the individual is being ignored. That means something about this system of ours is causing people to forget certain decent states of their own being and to shift their nature in accordance. And what I feel it is on some level subconscious game theory. That means everybody has a sort of basic intelligence, and that basic intelligence, you can say, it's like, if when you can drive a car on a street, you have this. And the suggestion is that you can understand that you're a player in a game. Any person who's played sports, anyone who's been in a team activity, what does that mean? That means you got to put away your inner dimensions for a second and look at what's in the outer and live to adjust with the outer. Do you know? It's like, my kind of concern is that the evolution that people see is a snapshot. That our relationship with the truth of this world has, to some degree, if it has been only based on our inner realms, has been hollow. That means it's like a strange kind of surrender. I don't want to say sacrifice, but I want to say it's like a release. It's like you realize your inner self has been holding your outer self, and your outer self has been holding the inner self. And for the first time, when the dimensions separate, you begin to realize that eternity has to do with conscious continuity. And the only way consciousness could be continuous endlessly, that means the only way evolution is satisfied, is if from the beginning there was no loss. So, what that means is, we are creatures right now, our species is oscillating between the zero. I mean, this is in my own playful analogies and kind of views, but the way I see it is that, let's say that all of existence, and I'm saying this like in a from like as if um, hear what I'm saying as if what I'm saying. Okay. Entertain four dimensions to this existence, and whoever you are, whatever kind of conscious living being you are. Acknowledge the zero dimension. Things, there is absence in this life, things can break apart, things can leave. And death is, in some sense, you leaving yourself, you know? And it's kind of in relationships when you leave people behind, it's as if it's some sort of death of the image, do you know? Death of the inner self. So it's like you first acknowledge zero, how things kind of step out from the void and enter the void, you know, and return to the void, kind of like waves of an ocean. After that, after the zero dimension, we have the one dimension. The one dimension is simply singular. It means that your intelligence as a conscious living being in this moment is that you acknowledge things in singular position. For example, look at all the different objects you see around you. Why are these called objects? Why do we even use that word? Because there is a distinction between these group of atoms and with these kind of pigment color, and at the same time the difference between other, you know. So we have in some sense classified atoms into different objects, yet if they're all still in one place, they're all atoms at the end of the day, you know what I mean? So this is the singular, the one dimension, as I say. And in this dimension, you have to be able as a human being to acknowledge things singularly. If you cannot, you are not ready to explore, to navigate, to wonder about the unknown. That means don't look for other dimensions when still the objective reality has not been observed yet. It's like spirituality, those people who run towards it as if they want to escape the world, you will realize it is going to eventually mirror your intent. So it's like how you enter the room suggests kind of like how the room receives you. And think of it this way, that how you enter your mind, enter the unknown, it's pretty much how you receive it in accordance to how much you have acknowledged that a singular, the zero dimension and the singular dimension. Now, before I go beyond this, I'm going to say, so imagine these dimensions: zero dimension, one dimension, two dimension, and then infinity, the infinite dimension. Okay, well, I say infinite because I can go into three and as endless dimensions as numbers, but I just say infinity after two. You know, sometimes I have said infinity after three, but yeah, I'm going to say infinity after two here. So that means it's like all human beings require to acknowledge these four dimensions. I could say these are Mr.Within's kind of four dimensions of reality that one can acknowledge. So we went through the zero dimension, we went through the one dimension. The zero and one dimension, their relationship is pretty much all of knowledge. Not all of knowledge, but it's like nothing came out of something. You know, it's the relationship of fullness with emptiness, absence with what is there. So that means when you have an ability as an intelligent moment of being to see how all these objects are in your room and also are able to consider how they could also not be, or how existence could also not be, when you have comfortable with comfort, contentment, experiential contentment with a zero dimension, uh, like awareness, let me say. You know, when you're content with nothingness, when you're content with the singular, then you move on to contentment with the dualistic. And the contentment with the dualistic is a dimension where stories begin. That means stories require duality. And that means it's so easy. Language is a wheel that's spun. You know? If you understand the yin yang symbol, you understand the linguistic simulation. You understand how language moves. or you understand how to move in language or through language. The dualistic dimension, the two dimension, you got to be able to confront the good and the bad. You got to be able to confront. It's like the first duality was the confrontation of zero and one. Then the next duality is the confrontation of the singular and the dualistic. Now, something unique happens. When you have an ability, when you have like attained the allegiance of the zero dimension, and you have attained allegiance of the singular dimension, automatically you are left to observe excuse me, the secondary dimension. Not saying the two dimension, let me say, the dualistic dimension. And so really duality is, whenever I speak about duality, I feel like a pilot, and I see duality as the propellers. I see duality as the wings of the plane. I see the chaos and order that is required to keep the story of a human being alive to itself, you know. So after you have also been able to witness chaos and order in the same moment, or being the originating from the same moment, that means you're realizing if in one moment you can perceive a chaotic self, okay, sure, why not you perceive a better self? You can. There's so many ways that you can sculpt the clay of your own attention. You can pilot your attention in incredible ways, and sometimes when you trust the honest and simpler version of yourself, you access a sort of insight to various ways you can reapproach the complexity. So in regards to innovation, invention, it's kind of like I thought about it, what is the best invention that an inventor can make? An invention that endlessly till the end of time invents. The infinite invention, you know. That means once we create this, we make the inventiveness of human beings obsolete. It's as if we have created technology that has replaced all the things we had to do to evolve. And so now are totally moving. It's as if the weather of the cultural global mind is strange. And sometimes I feel, what is this? Is the whole planet like a brain? Like, is civilization evolving into some next level brain? That means like all the people in different nations, all the different personalities, all the let's say poetically the destinies and life purposes of various human beings who have lived. It's as if they were neurons in the brain of the planetary sector, the universal sector. That means sometimes it's funny. Sometimes life gives you the duality. Sometimes you give the duality to life. You know, there's some. I think the greatest wisdom is to know. Is to find a moment where the mind trusts itself, and then excellence emanates. That's the secret. That's the secret that was never a secret. It was only a secret because language is left in the dualistic dimension. So this is why anytime a philosopher looks at language, they feel they're on the edge. The scientist is at the center of language, not at the edge. The scientist requires the trust of language, requires the symbology, but the philosopher is like, I dare. Like the philosopher dares break the language and kind of wonder what else is there. Some people are seeking truths that relate to their experience. Some people just want to be entertained. They realize that life can become such a complex problem that, of course, it may never have an answer because the factors we're considering are too large. So it's like sometimes when you can't handle a problem, let's say they give you a giant problem, how do you handle it? Well, you look at why is that problem giant, and you see it's a huge problem. And so what you do is you take a little chunk of it by intuition, by your interest, and then attempt to see how you could make a little percentage of the like you test it out. You test until like to see if you can shift the problems designed by 12. If you can solve 12% of a problem, then I feel you can 100% solve the problem. You can even, when you even see 12% that you gets you close, like how can I tell you? It's like if the problem can shift and still be the same problem, then the problem is not of that dimension, strangely. We are forces that are animate, you know. We are, like, it's as if, like, I remember seeing this video. It was hilarious. I forget the guy's name, but it was like this actor was shouting and he's like, I'm a goddamn human being, you know. And the actor was angry and shouting and he's like, I'm gonna get angry. It was like an embodiment of anger through that actor. That actor was like like in that moment his anger was literally the words on the script. Imagine imagine you're a film director and the actor's dialogue is so relevant to exact reality that it's as if the actor is 100% like his real, the actor's real self is the exact image, you know. They say the eyes are the window to the soul. And when I looked at my own eyes in the mirror, I realized the soul is the one looking. And so experience felt as unknown as, have you ever had have you ever experienced a moment in this life where you get an adrenaline rush because something unknown happens? For example, there was a Sadhguru, this person, this yogi, he actually has a YouTube channel. This modern yogi, he said he was like walking in India at night in a forest. He went for a night walk, and there was moonlight in a forest. You can imagine dark forest lit by moonlight, And as the person is there, he suddenly sees a branch that represents a cobra. And he doesn't know it's a branch at first, and so he gets paralyzed by fear because it felt like a, I don't know what he said, like 10 feet cobra or something, and then he realized it's in some sense the branch of a tree. And so in that very second, the mind suddenly dis, um, deviated from its familiar comfort. So really the mind is way more sensitive than the body, because the mind is confronting movement. The body is simply defined by its stillness, right? To develop a new modern civilization, not only the idea of the civilization must change, but the behavior of human beings must be taken into consideration. And the behavior of human beings is left in a situation where they are either acting in accordance to who they are, or they're acting in accordance to what they want to be. And those who act in accordance to what they want to be, they must entertain the illusion that is brilliant. That means there are some people who must go to the shadow because they want to see a greater light. Their success is defined by it. But there are some people who, in some sense, it's not that they want to go into a greater shadow, but they wonder about the implication of change in their experience. And ultimately, there will come a separation. It's as if, like, if you, whoever I think gives like 10,000 talks, you'll automatically notice. You'll become a continental philosopher in no time, you know. Because there is definitely a kind of uniqueness about the position of free will, where there is free will to observe and continue observing what you create. It's like the echo of our actions is karma. That means how long did it take us to evolve to be able to even acknowledge the concept that there is cause and effect, you know? Now, what are the options? The options are either, like, let's say you open your eyes and you see this current civilization. What are the options? Either the civilization has to maintain its past. So, in other words, the civilization is obligated to carry on a torch. Therefore, because it's obligated to carry on a torch, it cannot ever detach from its past. So the best thing we can do is kind of create a new, another version of civilization, and call it Civilization 2.0. And then in this Civilization 2.0, what we're trying to do is that we created as a civilization based on just purely the future. That means we start at least making we unite all the nations. That's the first task. Imagine we're all one nation. Now, as we're one nation, we begin to kind of divide into a sort of different hemispheres of the brain. So civilization 2.0 is like the right side of the brain. So the current civilization me and you are living in is like 1.0 is the left side of the brain, you know? And so it's kind of about world building. So many people, their happiness is based on their idea of self. I'm telling you, it's like so many people with all their desires and ambitions, and sometimes in the kind of suffering of the states of their hard work, they cannot see simpler ways to achieve, because the image in their mind is like the inner realms is putting a carrot in front of their outer realm. So the person, regardless of where they go, they just see not a carrot. Let me say it's like somebody putting a painting in front of your face. You're like, okay, man, thanks. I see the painting, but you're causing me to only see your painting. That means this is kind of hilarious. But anyone who's an artist, if you want someone to only see your painting, take your painting as close as you can to their eyesight, because literally they won't be able to see anything else other than your painting. Now, I forgot to actually explain the infinite dimension, but I guess I'll get to it here. Maybe I left it for here. We all became one nation, imagine. This nation started to take the shape of a brain. Rather than it's like kinda all the nations we currently have right now. It's kind of hilarious, actually. We have various different nations. I'm not saying that all these nations unite. I'm not saying all borders open up. I'm just saying that we realize these are not actually nations, they are sub-nations of the future nation. So what that means is various attempts, of course, must be taken. It's like this is what I'm talking about. Hopefully, one day, the greatest minds on the planet will be wondering, because we have to act like architects. That's kind of like the wisdom of life to some degree, where you plant seeds that will be trees you will not be sleeping under. You know, you will not be like resting under. Now, there was a time where I did consider poetically my soul to be a bundle of kind of designs, like the soul was the common denominator between all of the memories and all the uh, various phenomenology of my experience. But it's kind of like the freedom of realizing that if all the nations acted as sub nations, they would also be behaving. So you see, the advantage of us having minds is that we're not just in the singular dimension. Do you know? That means we're not just moving objects, right? We are objects that can generate subjects, that can receive subjects, that can pass on subjects. What I honestly feel is that hopefully by the time that all nations they realize that their true self is a kind of global community, once this global community takes place, that means all nations have to share their resources because on another dimension, they're all one nation. Right, but on another sub-nation, the sub-nations have their allegiance. So, kind of what I'm saying is, imagine the world is divided up into kingdoms, old school style, Game of Thrones style. Now, imagine all these kingdoms were in one giant kingdom, right? And they were busy fighting among themselves, but suddenly realized, whoa, we're all one kingdom. How hilarious. So if it was one kingdom, that means that as there was a detachment, in religion from state. There was a detachment from religious ideology, just navigating the governmental system of a nation purely. Do you know? Because that means you're kind of like putting it it's like a sixth century ideology on a nation. So what I mean by that is it's kind of like nations that are governed just purely by religion. And when I say religion, I'm not saying it in a bad light. I'm just using the word religion. I'm saying that it's like there are some nations that a lot of how they process the decisions they will make for their nation is through religious values, right? Now, the issue is that it's like imagine you didn't change, like you suddenly grew, like let's say, like whatever age, okay, let's say you grew 20 years in like one moment, and suddenly the shirt you had when you were like 6 years old suddenly like ripped apart, or were suffocating you. So what I mean by that is like the ideology doesn't fit the vastness of the creativity and the potential that a nation has. Right, so it's all ideology administration on a personal level and on a collective level, really. So if all the nations realize they're sub-nations, what would that mean? That means every person, doesn't matter where you're from, you are of the human design. Because I see a lot of people think about extraterrestrial contact. Okay, now I thought about it. I'm like, okay, let's go ahead. Let's say we made extraterrestrial contact and it was a good kind of advanced alien civilization. Let's say whatever alien civilization it was peaceful. Now, these creatures would be landing on Earth. At that point, when aliens are among our society, walking on our streets, there's nobody that's weird. That's the moment aliens put a step on Earth, the concept of weird gets destroyed when they're living among us, right? So what I mean is, like, trust me, there's going to be a lot of language revolutions. There's a lot of human beings are just going to wake up in the next 100 years being like, holy shit, how have I been just trapped in the ideology I was spoon fed as a child? Where's the rage and roar of my mind in this unknown landscape? It's as if my eyes have opened. What is freedom? What is its lack? What is vision? What is its absence? What is that candle flame that we keep lit as members of a species we are creatures on a rock, for God's sakes? Really, this isn't this. It's like it moves beyond. It's like I thought there's something such as surrealist art, and then I laughed. I'm like, oh my God, our existence is surreal. There was this Zen master named Chung Su. One day, his disciples, his homies, come to him, and they see he's frowning. His disciples see him; he's frowning, and they're like, "Whoa, this man who's been navigating through clarity. What is this distress?" As if they saw a storm in behind his eyes. They saw there was a storm. There was a sort of inner chaos the being was confronting. You know, Trust me, it doesn't matter how great you are as a person. Humanity is your greatness. It's like it's just all about a matter of time. The species realizes this. Chung Tzu says, "I had a dream," and the disciples are like, "What kind of dream? Like a Martin Luther King?" He's like, no, a dream, like an actual dream. Martin Luther King's dream was actually like a crystallized vision. I feel it was like it was like he saw the future and he was just shouting it at the ignorance of his time, you know. But anyways, Chung Tzu. Let's go back to Chung Tzu. Chung Tzu says, "I had a dream. I was a butterfly, flying in the most beautiful garden, in the Garden of Paradise." He says, "I woke up and I did not know if I was a Zen master dreaming I was a butterfly, or if I was a butterfly dreaming I was a Zen master." This dude felt he was a butterfly dreaming he was some dude, you know? The implication is kind of like his altered states appear to him as another dimension. So he had a sort of existential crisis in how to position what is real. And it really depends on your preference as a being. Some people are easygoing with their subjective realm, some people are not. Some people, the subjective realm has to, it's like their whole honor, their whole, the honor of their ego depends on the language that is kept in their vision. You know, it's without tolerance and freedom, there's no flexibility for advancement. So ultimately, it would mean a peaceful resolution to human behavior. So if we were to kind of look at every human being, and I'm not saying to analyze this as if like we're robots, but like I'm saying that there will come a separation of personality from state. And when that separation comes from personality and state, it means human beings, they no longer become the active builders of their world, they become the programmers of their world. And we will reach an era of psychology where a lot of things in your life must be programmed. Just think about how many things, how many you when you go on the computer for your social media, you got to log in. Do you know when you're on your phone checking your time or using the calculator or whatever? Like it's like various applications are being used. You're constantly finding a sort of, you can say the same way a person goes and logs into, for example, their social media, is the same way the shamanics, the shaman in the Amazons kind of chanted and jumped around the fire to attain a sort of kind of trance state, you know? So what I'm saying, like a sort of trance psychedelic state. And so the idea is that behavior is dominating, and if pleasure is extracted from the wrong behavior, then it becomes self-domination. So trust me, it's like a person can the a person cannot just dominate others, they can dominate their own self. And they can dominate by their own self by having their attention not recognized. As much as they pay attention to the chaos and anxiety and stress ridden realms of their world, interpretations of their world, there is also simultaneously an ability to see something else. you know it's like depression is just you've gone to a museum and you're just looking at one artwork and you're just sad about it. You're like, why was I like that in that moment? Why? It's like a artwork in a museum. You know what I mean? Imagine somebody made a museum of different art galleries. Really, ultimately, you're looking at a system where individual factors can either integrate or perish alone. We have perished alone for a while, but eventually we're realizing technology has brought forth a sort of bridge to our inner realms. And so what that means is, for the first time, we're discovering for example, when you see, like when you see Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson speak, or various great speakers in the Oxford University, and what you really see there is kind of like a sharing of one's inner realms to a sort of to the best of their ability, you know? I feel an awareness to language, a modern sensitivity to language will arise. It will evoke a sort of what I call the multidimensional renaissance. And for the first time, people's minds are going to rebel against the archetypes they have accepted, they have been inhabiting, the architecture they have been giving. It's as if realizing you are the architect of your moment. And with that comes great responsibility. With that comes a responsibility that no longer think knowledge is accumulation. You're no longer looking for treasure. The treasure, you are in the treasure. Do you know? And so when you really come to this precision, a sort of I don't call it fragmentation of self, I call it the multidimensional revelation of self. Your subjective realm gets momentum. Suddenly everything you have seen since your childhood makes sense. Every design, every idea, vision expands. Vision is gaining momentum. Sometimes in the subjective realms there can be moments, and as this vision is kind of developing, there will come the rise and fall of archetypes. There will come the rise and fall of multiverses behind your eyes. And when this rise and fall of multiverses occurs behind your eyes, the responsibility of the soul demands a new mind. So what that means is as if suddenly you have been functioning as an ignorant mind in this body, and suddenly your soul lands as if the roar of a greater dimension upon its like younger brother, as if it's, imagine like your older brother from another galaxy shouts at you, shouts at the planet. And so what I mean is, you are experiencing the rise and fall of the subjective realm. You're also realizing how the self and the world are changing places. There are moments of pure stillness where mind becomes world. There are moments of pure movement where mind is the self in the world. Your individuality highlight is the highlight of your experience. So this momentum can build up to such a degree that it will move you into an experiential position where you stop becoming dependent on ideology for your existence. You stop depending on language to constantly be right, to be perfect. You realize the world, external realm, has no obligation to be as perfect as your inner realms. And when you realize this, that's when you realize the playgrounds you dwelled in as a child have now become battlefields. And these battlefields are not physical battles. All wars, all violence must immediately end. And it cannot end. It must just be internalized. That means it's kind of like you should take the chaos of the externality behind your eyes and kind of extinguish the flame internally. Do you know? That means get angry, close your eyes, and destroy as many thoughts you want. But in front of your eyes, respect the earth that has taken this up here. That's the elegance of nature. When I walk in nature, I am not a man. I am the moment. And that's the significance, that the ability of the human attention to not be identified with the change, but to witness it. And as the witness appears to itself as the infinite. And when you appear as yourself as the infinite, that means for the first time your mind is accessing the unknown. And what is that access to the unknown? It is the potential of various probabilities of self. So it's like right now, whoever you think you are, if I ask you who are you, and you're like, I'm this guy, I have this work, and I do this and this, and so you are like sculpting this character in front of me, and you're giving it to me, and you're like, this is who I am, and I'm like, okay, I see the sculpture. But I take the sculpture and I just put it beside you, and I'm telling you, how are you this when you're standing in front of me? So the unknown has a fierceness. It is like, it's like they say, like the rage of 10,000 suns. It's like the roar of 10,000 lions, and you have kind of the archetype of the moment can move. Like sometimes in my subjective realms, I've experienced a sort of glorification of an utmost absolute. It's as if my mind was attempting in that moment to see what my greatest self would be. And there has been moments where my mind has attempted to see what my weakest, worst self has been. And what tends to happen is that I am standing, I am judging my own past. And the archetype is like a vampire by the judgment of the past attaining its definition. Do you know? So one has to become sensitive to how their attention moves the language before the language moves the attention. So what does that mean ultimately for the modern civilization? For the modern civilization, it means the remembrance of the global archetypal structure of compassion. We get defined by our simplicity. You cannot love something that is too complex for you. Do you know? Imagine there are two people perfect for one another. It's as if they are. It's the best, the most incredible thing. You know. But you suddenly see behind the eyes of these two people, these two beautiful people, is totally different realms. One is entertaining a complexity, the other is entertaining a simplicity. You know, one is living like an artist and the other is living like an engineer. It's kind of like, strangely, like airbender thing, but we're wielding the forces of the interpretation, of the subjective interpretation of the objects of our moment. Now, I noticed there's the need for something. Guys, I saw a poverty commercial and it made me emotional. It brought me tears, but my tears were not for the poverty. It was for what was being lost in the poverty, the potential of an unknown mind. This is when I say you suddenly revalue your species. You revalue every story. You realize all histories were in some sense not perfect, were not complete. And so once a global identity kind of sprouts in the individual, they begin wondering what it would be like if you could consider looking through the eyes of others. As they say, treat others as you treat yourself. What is that, like the golden rule or something? Like treat others as you treat yourself. So now yourself is a global entity. What that means is Diogenes, even though Diogenes was a bit savage, he lived a savage life. But I'm telling you, this man, somebody came and asked him, "Where are you from?" He's kind of known in philosophy as the father of cynicism. They asked him, it's like, "Where are you from?" And Diogenes said, "Where am I from? I am a citizen of the cosmopolites." He shouted, as if I'm a child of this universe. How dare you put me in your own box? And of course, Diogenes was that guy trying to enlighten the person by doing exactly the opposite. Like you can say a lot of like there's definitely a parallel between Diogenes' approach to truth and Zen's approach to truth. You know, there were certain Zen masters that they would hit their student with a stick, to kind of make the student realize, why is this guy hitting me with the stick. Like I think there was a story like that. Let me see. Like there's a story where this Zen master hits this guy with a stick, and then the guy takes the stick and hits him back when all the other students have just been hit by the stick, and then the guy's like, "See, this guy's enlightened." Now, people are drawn to what adds um, to the dimensions of their life. That means ultimately a system thrives, or a system is satisfactory when it satisfies the members in the system. So imagine we have the separation of personality with state. So ultimately, what is governing this state is ideology. So it's like no longer the major decisions of humanity are done by a personality, which can become a good guy or a bad guy, but we have it done by a sort of council of consideration. Do you know? Because the system is that the voice, it's like a certain part of civilization is in the light, and it's blooming and it's advanced, and we're like, okay, we see this part and it's great, but there's many shadows and many hidden things that are going on in the civilization, and it's crucial to be aware of this. I also say, I should have probably mentioned this earlier, beyond the dualistic dimension, I consider that's beyond the language threshold. Therefore, we cannot speak about what we cannot compare as a thing to some other thing. So anything that is experienced in an instant cannot be put into words. It can be only put into words when there's a sort of space where change has been acknowledged. The reference points has shifted. The points of reference have shifted. You know, I see in my inner realms a vision has visited me often. And when I say a vision has visited me often, I mean that I have there has been an emotion. Usually thoughts gain high speed when emotion arises. Your inner realms becomes really high speed when you're emotional, or there's a sort of sensitivity to sudden change. If we define ourselves based on our objectivity, we can be no other definition. So, in some sense, to be purely a materialistic being means you are a hallucination of electrons. You are not this. This is an illusion of something else. Therefore, free will is rendered elusive the moment you are purely material. It's kind of like this. The atheist is like water in ice form. Or let me say it like this: the scientist is like solid, the solid state. The philosopher is the liquid state, 50% known, 50% unknown. And then we can say the kind of metaphysicist is like gas. The spiritualist is like gas. You see, a lot of spiritual ideology just takes you into accepting the edge of your moment, which is now. And it's definitely a test in some degree, where it's as if you cannot be comfortable with the greatness of others, you are not comfortable with how your mind, with the greatness of how your mind is attaining people as impressions. So any hatred you have to anything external to you, you are simultaneously having it to the mind that is projecting it. So with this realization, there comes the kind of new renaissance in the behavior of human beings, as we realize there's more to share. You know, the purpose of life, really, if we consider this cosmos like a room, like it's a giant room we're in, then the purpose is the contents in the room, and the contents in the room are what is given, and what is given is a very unique and sophisticated evolutionary position, and the birth that we are literally pioneering an advanced civilization. Anybody alive hearing this in 2020, I'm telling you, we are alive at a point where we have to pioneer the civilization. And let me tell you what is happening. Many civilizations have lived on this earth, and they have left energetic imprints, and many children on this planet have been born. And sometimes when you look at the kind of substratum of uh, the personality, you come to the conclusion that it is various fields, and it's like the attention is moving between various fields, and wherever it goes in the field, it gets a certain position. You know, so it's as if, like, imagine this thing where I said the solid state, liquid state of mind, the gas state of mind, the empty state of mind. So this kind of solid, liquid, gas thing, imagine you realize you're oscillating between all three all the time. So really what happens is, when you study the dualisms of your life, like every personality is kept on some axis of a philosophical assumption of reality. And that axis is crucial. If you are not comfortable with the axis of your thinking to change, you have not understood the nature of thought. But to understand it is very simple. As Aristotle would say, it is the sign of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. What does that mean? That means, if, like, look at an object around you, you know, like, just target one, look at one object. And when you like see that object right now, and for a second imagine that object became the center of your life. You started doing everything for that object. That object became truth for you, everything for you. So at some point you're like, no, it's like you treat it like an object. It's just something there. Do you know? There's no philosophical inquiry, it's just an object there. So the way Aristotle is saying is, we begin to kind of notice that there's a sort of witnessing a space between the subject and the being. And that witnessing space between the subject and the being is literally how, from an attribute, what appears at least as an attributeless dimension, we are perceiving dimensions. The idea that the void is cannot be void. Not just because we are here, is because the void can exist alone. So it's like we kind of come to a sort of unique philosophical speculation of, did the chicken come first, or did the egg, did emptiness come first, or manifestation? And so it's realizing that this is the parallels, that at the edge of one, like in the hollowness of one earth, there resides an inner earth, another earth. So really, based on the multidimensionality of our vision, the dimensions of the world are kind of poured into a sieve. and that sea fragments into multidimensional personalities. So what I mean is, people are not, there's no such thing as everything modern psychology is saying. I respect it, but it's of civilization 1.0. It's not of civilization 2.0. The civilization 2.0 attitude towards psychology is that it is an incredibly sophisticated process, and it has various unknown factors. And it's kind of like a person could be sitting on a couch and suddenly they feel uncomfortable and they're like, what is this? And they speculate, they go through an inner journey and they're like, oh my God, what was my childhood like? What was all of this? What's the meaning of life? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, why do I have this discomfort, this suffering? And suddenly the person realizes they've been sitting on the remote controller of the TV, and that was the source of the discomfort. The guy takes it off and his suffering is gone. So do you see? It's kind of, the sensitivity to thoughts is very beautiful. It opens up the dimension of elegance. And when I say elegance, I'm saying it like Zen mindfulness, but with a sort of reverence for the potential advancement of what is there in front of you. Because what can really happen? Things remain, and nature changes it, or you change it while you're alive. What else can you do? What else can the person do? I mean, I understand those yogis that went in caves and like for so many years were in samadhi and were just in one objective position as a being, and were kind of just existing in their subjective realms and the divine authority of their subjective realms. Pretty much the attention is oscillating between two worlds. We're literally standing between an inner dimension and an outer dimension, kept by language. The veil is language. When there is no language, there's most likely just experiences truth ultimately itself. But anyways, that thing I was saying about the fragmentation of the psyche, the psychology, and how civilization 2.0 would see it is that, you see, like, sure, I could totally understand that a clinician like someone like Peterson, this kind of incredible kind of psychologist, kind of sitting and hearing someone and being able to kind of find ways of actually helping the person. Sometimes those people who are outside of your mind can see your mind the best, you know? Hence the whole guru thing, because sometimes you can have a box on your head that you can't see, but others can see, and they just take that box off, you know. And so many people, that's a sort of that you can say, this is hilariously a sort of another dimension of cruelty, which has to do with knowledge that a person can give to someone to help them, and many people keep it dormant. What that means is, it's not people not just helping those who are in poverty, it is people who are in competition with their own storylines. One can say the evolution of the human being has been an evolution from unconsciousness to consciousness. And this evolution to consciousness has come with it with a new result, that now we use our free will to wonder about what the unknown is, and we do not fear what we naturally are. The moment you fear what you naturally are, it's as if the machines have already won. And honestly, I don't see, like, when I think about machines, I don't see it like a kind of matrix outcome. I don't see machines like that. That means I can totally entertain potentials of civilization that are technological, that are not madness oriented. Because madness means competition, means like we are taking something and the other is taking something. And so because everybody's taking, so you take first, and so it becomes savageness. Will, it's like animals hunting. So when we evolve from animals hunting, we become geniuses inventing. That's the leap. That's the leap. That your behavior also is defining your psychology. And sometimes a person, it's not hard, I find, but it's like, think of it this way. Imagine your beliefs are clothing you're wearing. You're wearing this clothing, but on an attributeless self that is pure attention. Many efforts will be made. And I find myself, when I was younger, I was basking in my inner realms, and the more I'm kind of running laps around the sun, I'm noticing that the outer realm is becoming significant, significant, significant. And so it seems like there's a beauty, it's like kind of fascinating. It's like, how a person has various thoughts throughout the day, various angles of perception animate as subjectivity for them. So it's kind of like the same, how would I say it? Here's the resolution. Find a balance between the dynamic self and the static self. Just confront it as a human being, and I am telling you, life will become you can pilot it. Your free will is not defined because it has to find truth, it creates it. That means, what is more divine than what God did? It's as if man does what God did, if every person in religious circles kind of considered, okay, God, the most divine thing, God were to follow what God did, even before the concept of a sort of revelation, what God did was to create. Therefore, the action of creation to be forbidden is strange when what God did was to create everything. And so I found that really it's about how much the inner realms have been preserved, and it's a cool time to be alive because language is breaking down and the experiencers beyond the personality of the person are coming, are stretching forth, are extending. It's like your subjective realms realize the void is the void for everyone. Every person you have ever loved, every person you have ever hated is standing in the void. And therefore the ultimate resolution is the creative vision. Is to kind of figure out, why do we have access to the new? Why are there, it's like, if we're alive temporarily, where is the definition of our freedom arising? How are we choosing to acknowledge who we are or what we are? And so it's like, what, after the fruition, after you have completely lived for yourself, you will realize the world is that self's greater self. So it's like the Buddha kind of realizes, oh man, we got to be bodhisattvas. We have to, we it's like um, everybody who's alive, the field of intelligence has a requirement for your energetic expression. And we have to literally, like, I don't want to say build Noah's Ark, but at least kind of attempt to create a global narrative where children wake up not feeling they're on just a rock in empty space. That's the solution. And one last thing to say, guys, about, I'll say this about the wallpaper I chose. Look at the letter I. Like, I didn't choose it. I didn't like plan the I to be there. But like the I is kind of like on the flower, and it's as if it's the identity. Your identity is observable. Therefore, regardless of you identifying with it or not, you're beyond it. So really, vision is fascinating. It's like becoming, there's one thing of becoming responsible for your physical existence, but to become responsible for your subjective realms, it's like there's no greater honor. It's like, what else can man do? There's a mind, and it can roar, and it should. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. a slogan that I've written in many of my writings. Rise, mankind, rise. Rise kindly.